Hey everyone, it's Aaron. Hope everybody's doing well. I made a little document here, and I got a picture here that I'm going to show you. We've got this 7, and we've got this 7 earthquake kind of design in Turkey, and this is a picture of the earthquakes. This was 7,700 earthquakes since the strongest on February 7th. And somebody gave me this piece of wood at the beach, basically the same time that this 7 was being created, if you understand what I mean. I think around February 11th, according to my memory. Somebody gave me this piece of wood. They said, hey, I just want to give this to you. I think it'll make you happy. I'm like, okay, well, thanks. And I just put it in my pocket. And then somebody, there's 2 people that sent me this picture, actually, Tracy and Sharon, about an hour apart. I don't know, like a week ago, something like that. So I thought the 7s were interesting, but this threw me into a bit of a spin of a study, and some of these things I was studying before these 7s happened, but it kind of relates to each other. So I made a little chart here. This is a little bit better than putting my camera on the screen, so I made a little Google Drive thing here. Okay, so a few of these points I mentioned in some past videos, and some of these things are new. So let's go over some of these notes. So we got this genealogy in the book of Luke. Now, if you go to the end and you count yourself backwards, the genealogy of Jesus Christ, if you start from Adam, Enoch is number 7. And we know that Enoch was taken before the flood. Okay, so he is a guy that we want to be aware of. Apparently, he was taken up in chariots of fire, just like Elijah was. I'm not 100% sure, but that's the rumor on the street. And if you keep on going down, we've got Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And I think that's pretty amazing that Jacob is number 23. And I made a point in my mind a couple weeks ago. You know what? I really want to call it Jacob's trouble. We got to kind of step away from calling it, the tribulation or the great tribulation or, the wrath or whatever. I think it's really important for us to understand that it's Jacob's trouble, and that's part of the reason why we are out of here. And so Jacob's number 23, okay, and then Judah, which I talked about. Judah sold Joseph in the Old Testament for 20 pieces of silver, and Judah sold Jesus in the New Testament for 30 pieces of silver, and we're kind of speculating that maybe the second coming will be 2030, and Jacob's trouble will start in 2023. And this is just hypothetical. Eventually, guys, we're going to see the patterns. Eventually, we're going to be in the clouds one day, and we're going to look back and be able to confirm it through all the numbers in the Bible. So whether it be in 23 or another year, we're going to look back and confirm these numbers. But, these 23s are starting to hop out in the Bible, and so we're going to go through some of these. So keeping in mind that it's Jacob's trouble. All right, so let's go do some numbers here. We get this title, Jacob's trouble. A strong verse for this is Jeremiah 30, verse 7. And we just do some simple math. Okay, it's 30, verse 7. 30 minus 7 is 23. And we were waiting for 7 years in this time of Jacob's trouble. It's Daniel's 70th week. And I'm going to read that verse there. Ask now and see whether a man is ever in labor with child. So why do I see every man with his hands on his loins like a woman in labor? And all faces turn pale. Verse 7, alas, for that day is great, so that none is like it. And it is a time of Jacob's trouble. That's verse 7. But he shall be saved out of it. Okay, so we've got Jacob 30, verse 7. Again, it kind of points us to 23. Jacob's the 23rd person, again, listed in the genealogy, and we have 30 minus 7. But there's more things that are fun in the Bible here. And, and at the very least, guys, I'm trying to show you some patterns that are undeniable in the Bible. And I think if you start to see the Bible in this context, you're going to find some exciting things too. So, Jeremiah chapter 30, verse 23. Okay, 30, verse 23. Behold, the whirlwind. We're waiting for the rapture whirlwind. The whirlwind of the Lord goeth forth with fury, a continuing whirlwind. It shall fall with pain upon the head of the wicked. That's right. When the rapture happens, it's going to be painful. It's going to be brutal. For those left behind. 30, verse 24, which could kind of connect with 2024. The fierce anger of the Lord shall not return until he has done it, and until he hath performed the intents of his heart. In the latter days ye shall consider it. Okay, so those are the last 2 verses of chapter 30. very interesting how this could connect to 23 and 24 in terms of the year. Jeremiah 23, chapter 23, that could connect with 2023. What does it say? And I will gather the remnant of my flock out of all countries. Hello, that's a good one. And we want to take it one step further. Could it be the third month of 2023? Well, I don't know about that, but I certainly see it's a fun connection there. Whether I have driven them, and I will bring them again to their folds, and they shall be fruitful and increase. What else does it say in Jeremiah 23? Well, he references Sodom and Gomorrah. And we know that in Luke 17, it says it'll be like the days of Noah and the days of Sodom and Gomorrah, or the days of Lot. And so that's referenced in Jeremiah chapter 23. And Jarrett mentioned this in one of his videos from Supernatural by Design, Jeremiah chapter 6, verse 22. And this is very linear and really matches what's happened in real time. Thus says the Lord, behold, a people cometh from the north country, and a great nation shall be raised from the sides of the earth. Well, man, doesn't that sound like 2022? A great nation from the north country. Okay, or sorry, a people that cometh from the north country. Number 23 in Jeremiah 6. They shall lay hold on bow and spear. They are cruel and have no mercy. Their voice roareth like the sea, and they ride upon the horses, set in array as men of war, or men for war against thee, O daughter of Zion. Man, kind of sounds like our real time here. So 22 sounds like 2022. 23 sounds like 2023. What does 24 sound like? We have heard the fame thereof. Our hands wax feeble. Anguish hath taken hold of us, and pain as of a woman in travail. So is 2024 going to be the year, the big official year of travail? And maybe we're out of here in 23. Remember, I said it back here, like a woman in labor. Man, Jeremiah 30, verse 6. And then we got this other woman in travail over here. Okay. In the last verses of chapter 6, which we just read all that, 22, 23, 24, is verse 29 and 30. Isn't that cool? So we're looking at the end of this 7-year pattern being in 29 or 30. 30 at this point. Now, if you watched my Zechariah 5 video, I talked about lead and lead being connected to bombs. And here we are. The bellows are burned. The lead is consumed of the fire. The founder melteth in vain, for the wicked are not plucked away. And the last verse 30, reprobate silver. Remember I talked about silver, Jesus being sold for 30 pieces of silver. So in verse 30, it's talking about silver. That's pretty fun connections here. Undeniable number connections that are super fun. In Genesis chapter 5 meaning grace, we've got verse 23, and verse 24 is basically talking about the age of Enoch and when he was taken. Could that mean that Enoch will be taken, either we being a type and shadow or connected with Enoch before the flood? Could we be taken in 23/24? We will see. And all the days of Enoch were 365 years. I think it's fantastic that his age was actually 365 years. I mean, our years are 365 right now. So that's a real nice link there with that one. And Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. So there you go. Is it 23? Is it 24? I mean, well, there's the numbers. Pretty interesting stuff. 1 Corinthians 15, verse 23. 23 potentially representing the year. Here's a big one. But every man in his own order, Christ the firstfruits. Afterward, they that are Christ at his coming. It's talking about Christ coming in verse 23. What does it say in verse 24? Then cometh the end. So it's talking about Christ coming in 23, and then in verse 24 it's talking about the end. I think you guys are seeing the pattern that I'm seeing. I'm seeing a lot of 23, 24 patterns here, and we're going to go on a little bit more. So this is just a year count. Okay. So we don't want to go too outside the box here, but just go with me on this one for a second. There are numbers that, if you just take out the zeros, they represent each other, right? So 2030, you drop the zeros, you got 2s and 3s, okay? 2040, you drop the zeros, you got 2s and 4s. So the only time that these numbers actually make a difference of 7 is right now, is the difference between 2030 and 2023. because the gap between 2040 and 2024 is 16 years. And the gap, respectively, for everything else is way more than 7. I think you guys can see what I'm saying here. This is really the only time where you can take out the zeros and it works out to be 7. The answer is 7. And like I said above, Jacob is the 23rd patriarch in the book of Luke. Really interesting number connection there. Genesis 23. So what I did was I went through the first 5 books and I just saw what are some things that we can pull out of these verses or these chapters. There's tons you can pull out, but I just wanted to grab the quick things that were pointing to 23 or 30 or 7's and that kind of thing. So Genesis chapter 23, I found it really interesting that Sarah, her death was at 127 years old, and the land that was bought to bury her was 400 pieces of silver. And here we are talking about silver again. I'm talking about silver again in chapter 23. And Esther, verse 1, it talks about the same number, 127 provinces. In that same chapter, it talks about a 180-day gap, which is what I'm looking at before. So I'm looking at a rapture, maybe in the spring, but we don't know. And then a 180-day gap, and then tribulation maybe starting in the fall of 23. That's my speculation right now. We'll adjust as we go. But isn't that interesting how we have a connection with the 127 number there? Exodus 23, we have a reminder of the 7th year, the Sabbath rest, a little bit of not the Shemitah cycle, but it's talking about the week cycle, and every 7 years there's a rest. And then it talks about the annual feasts. It's talking about unleavened bread and the 7 days. So again, we were waiting for the 7-year time of Jacob's trouble. And in chapter 23, it's got all these 7's all over the place. And what does it say in verse 20 and verse 23 in Exodus 23? Behold, I send an angel before thee to keep thee in the way and to bring thee into the place which I have prepared. Yeah, let's go. Let's get out of here. And then in verse 23, it's a very similar theme. For mine angel shall go before thee and bring thee in unto the Amorites. Fun patterns, fun numbers. Leviticus 23, very repetitive with the 7th day is a Sabbath, a continuation of that theme. And in Leviticus 23, it's the big chapter when it talks about the 7 official feasts of the Lord. And so and within those feasts, there's 7 days of this, 7 days of that, bring your 7 lambs, etc. And it's offerings made by fire. And so there's a lot there. I mean, the fact that the feasts of the Lord are in Leviticus chapter 23, I think is really, really incredible. And so what do we have in Numbers 23? We got a lot of fun in there. I just pulled it out a bit, but Balaam's 3 prophecies, there's an exchange going on between Balaam and Balak. And we have, it says, build them 7 altars and 7 oxen and 7 rams. And it does that a few times in this chapter. I didn't write it all out, but there's a lot of 7's again in the 23rd chapter in the book of Numbers, of all books. And, God wrote a book of Numbers. So here we are, Numbers 23, verse 7. We're talking about Jacob. Come curse me, Jacob, and come defy Israel. There's more to the story, but we have a Jacob reference in chapter 23, verse 7. We got all these 7's and 23's. We have another Jacob reference in Numbers 23, verse 10. Numbers 23, verse 20, which, could represent 2023 if you flip those numbers around. Behold, I have received the commandments to bless, and he hath blessed, and I cannot reverse it. It says the word reverse. Okay. Numbers 23, verse 21. It brings up Jacob again. Numbers 23 and 23. Let's just read that. Surely there is no enchantment against Jacob. So we've got lots and lots of Jacob references in Numbers 23. Numbers 23 ends with verse 30. Okay. And it has tons of 7 references in there. I didn't count it, but I don't know. If I was to go back, I don't know, probably like 8 times it says 7, or I'm not quite sure. But that's in the book of Numbers. All right. So we got Deuteronomy 23. Nevertheless, the Lord thy God would not hearken unto Balaam. It's talking about Balaam here again. But the Lord thy God turn the curse into a blessing unto thee, because the Lord thy God loved thee. So, there's way more. I know there's way more on these kinds of studies, and the patterns are not going to lie. Eventually, like I said, we're going to be up in the clouds, and we're going to understand. We're going to look back and say, okay, I can see the patterns now. I can see the numbers. I can see it all. And right now, we're on the other side of the fence, and we can't see everything quite clear. But this is quite incredible that it's Jacob's trouble. He's number 23 in the list of genealogy. Judah comes next. And like I said, I did a big video on that with the coins. And we know that Jesus is basically called the Lion of Judah. And he's coming back. He's coming back to rule. So, guys, make sure you enter into a relationship with Jesus Christ. Time looks short to me, in my perspective. I could be wrong, but it looks like we're going to be zipping out of here pretty soon. Until then, get tight with Christ, one day closer, and see you in the clouds. Go, Jesus, go.